continue. All right. So the topic of this meeting is I want to get you up to speed with not only just programming in front end, but with the whole T3 stack. The T3 stack is basically something that came up with after many, many years of people, running through something called the JavaScript fatigue, in which you have so many options when you are developing front-end applications, largely in JavaScript space, that you basically end up more time thinking about which tools you should use instead of what you should build. Okay. So T3 stack came about 2 years ago by this really weird guy who does really nice YouTube videos, but he also seems to be smart, so not just a typical influencer, but he's kind of like an influencer in the JavaScript world. So there are many things that are in that stack that make your life very easy. Largely, it's type safety, for example, in a sense that the stuff that you will do if you are building prototypes, it's always good to have type safety, because if you change something, you want to know that how that change is messing up the rest of your code, which in JavaScript world doesn't really happen, right? In JavaScript world, you change something, and unless you have unit tests covered by it, you probably have just broken your whole application. So let's just jump right into it. The setup phase is going to be the most painful one. So I think we're going to take at least half an hour to set it up, because I'm going to run you through several different services that you will have to set up. But you will do this largely and mostly once only. So for any future projects, you can just reuse this setup, and you can just lose time. Try to follow with me, so at least we'll see how fast you guys can get. And then by the end of this thing, we should have a good understanding of how the app works. Please stop me if you have any questions at any moment, so that we can, I can wait for you. You can share your screens, and then we can do it together. All right. So let me share my screen. And so we will go start with, let me actually close all this stuff in here. Let me close all this, close all that. I should have been more ready for you guys, but let me just quickly clean up my desktop so that we are good to go. Good and good. All right. So we will be using Visual Studio Code. So while I'll talk, if you could create your Visual Studio Code, if you could download it, if you don't have it. For terminals and this is for database. So let me just show you the tooling, all right? So largely what I really like to use is software called WebStorm, which is a tool from IntelliJ company. It's a little bit better than Visual Studio Code, in my opinion. It has many different cool things. And it comes for free if you're a student. So if you have a .edu account, download it and use it. Otherwise, please use Visual Studio Code, which I will use in this example if you don't want to use WebStorm, right? So I will use Visual Studio Code for this because that's what I've been using most of my time. But recently I switched to WebStorm because it has just a bit better tooling. But Visual Studio Code is there for free forever. So let's just use that for now. Okay. So I'll start with going to SkillPies, and I'll find that link that I sent you. So in the Creators Club, in the discussions, we have a Get Things Done here. And I'll go to this repo URL, okay? And what I'll do to start with is I will fork this repository, all right? That means that I will not touch the original code, but I will create a copy of this repository in my own space, okay? So I click fork, and it asks you where you want to fork it to, right? So I'm forking it to my personal account, and I just maintain the same name. This is a good initial start if you're going to be collaborating any projects, because the rest of the workflow will work in a way that you will work in your own repository, and that you create something called a pull request to the main repository. I'll show you pull requests later on, but this is not an important thing right now. And so this setup is good enough. And so we do create a fork here. Okay. So going to main URL, clicking the fork, and then this is the fork. Okay. Now, the next thing we need to do is we need to copy this URL. And then what you can either do in here in the code, you can do open with GitHub Desktop if you have it installed. Do not download zip. So either those two things, or you can open with Visual Studio. I am going to do it a little bit differently. I will open my console, and on your Windows, you should have, if you have installed Git or GitHub. So if you have GitHub, Git installed, you should be able to clone your code. So what I'll do, I go to my Creators Club, and then I do git clone this, and I'm going to clone it in my tutorial GTD. Okay, you don't have to write this last bit because I already have GTD web app there, so I just need a new name for this. Okay, and I've just cloned it in my tutorial GTD. And I will open the Visual Studio Code now, right? I can open it directly from the console using code dot, or you open the Visual Studio Code, and then you do file, open folder, and I'll go to my GitHub, Creators Club, tutorial GTD, and open. Okay. All right, let me see your faces if you guys are okay. Everybody's fine? Yeah. All right, good. Hopefully you guys have Git installed by now. If you don't have Git installed, you can just always install it, Git install. If you search for it, that's something that you will have to use at any moment. So just install the latest version and make sure it's there. Just use standard classic. It asks you a bunch of questions. Just go with the default and you'll be okay. Okay. Git is something we'll be using over and over, and something you'll be using for probably next 40 years of your life. So it's always good to become good friends with it. I will be using Git with a different software, but it's gonna come later on. I will pump into you things from the console a little bit at the beginning, but if you have a Git installed, this GitHub Studio, if you would go to this URL, sorry, going back, you can also do open with GitHub Desktop. And it actually GitHub Desktop, if you have it installed, it runs also on your computer. It actually asks you where do you want to install it. Okay. So I'm just gonna do cancel. I'm not going to do it, but what I can do here in the GitHub Desktop, just for the hell of it, I will actually add that project up in here. I believe, and this is me just trying things, that I should be able to just drag and drop the thing here, and it should yeah, it just asks you how do you want to add it, add repository, and there it is. Okay, so that's my current repository. So now I can see there are no local changes. The repository is nice and fresh, and it's all good. If you don't have a GitHub Desktop, don't worry about it. It's a nice piece of software, but I prefer a different one, which I'll show you later on as well. But this one is a good start. Now, the next bit is in Visual Studio Code, you open a terminal. You open a terminal by pressing Control tilde. Control tilde is this weird symbol in the top left corner. Or you do Control Shift or Command Shift P, and which is to open things, and you do open terminal. Okay, open a new terminal. Which you have a different, so no, that's external terminal. I just use this Windows shortcut so many times. I don't even know how to open it from here. Frankly, I do not know. So just use Control tilde for me, okay? Or Control or Command tilde, which should open, which opens the terminal for you. And what we're going to do now is we are going to install our dependencies, right? I'm gonna take you through this whole process, then I'll explain the project itself. So we're going to first set it up before we start diving into it, okay? So the first thing that I want you to do is does everybody have Node.js installed on their computers? Yes or no? One for the hand, Bob, Janavi?
I'm not sure.
Oh, okay. So if you are not sure, just in that, do you have this terminal? Just do
Yeah.
node, just type node. I'm gonna make it bigger for you guys, okay? So node and version. What does it say?
So V20, yeah, point
Okay.
one. Yeah, I do.
Okay, so you have it installed. Boy, all good?
I don't have it.
You don't have it. Okay, so for those that don't have it, that's very important to do. You go to Node.js download and download the Node.js. Download the latest version, which is probably the best one, and just download and install it. Okay. All right, so that you guys will be able to follow, let me just run you through the top level files, and then Boy just tell us once it finishes installing so that we can continue. All right. So install it, and I'm gonna take you through the files here. At least I'm not gonna go through the directories yet. I'll just go through the top level files. As you can see, we haven't typed a single line of code, and we already have like 100 files in here, right? And that is a general problem of JavaScript projects, is they have combination of different tools that you want to make work together, and it becomes daunting because you have so many configuration files. Most of these are actually config files. The tsconfig is a configuration file for your TypeScript compiler. TypeScript is the language that we'll be using to develop our applications, which is a type-safe version of JavaScript, essentially. Okay. The star database sh is a command that allows you to run a local instance of Postgres database in Docker. If none of this tells you anything, don't worry about it. We'll talk about Docker and all of those things later on. But we are going to be using a different database. We will set it up together on Vercel very soon. Okay, so you don't have to worry about this. Tailwind is a CSS framework. It's a framework that allows you to write friendly CSS comments in a very nice way. I love it because it makes you work really, really fast, and it's just so cool. It's worth investing your time because you guys will be super efficient if you're going to use Tailwind, and it's currently very much endorsed by the whole community. The one thing is it can come with a technological debt if people will, push it out, but it's kind of easy to convert Tailwind into standard styles, but it works really well. Prettier is a thing that automatically formats your code. It allows you to type messy code. Observe, so if I just do spaces here and just put it here, and then I do spaces here, press Control S, it just jumps right back in and formats everything nicely for you. It's a bit opinionated, so if you want to keep things, your way, it will not happen, but trust me, you're in good hands. The code looks beautiful, and you don't have to worry about formatting your code. It just formats automatically and is nicely readable. Post CSS config is something that belongs to Tailwind. You don't have to worry about it. PNPN block, I'll tell you about it it's for your package management. Package.json lists all the packages that you have installed in your current project. And as you can see, you haven't installed a single one, but because of this stack that I have developed, these are the initial packages that we will be using, right? I won't go through details of them. I will explore them as we go. Next is a configuration for the next framework. Cypress is for end-to-end testing. We'll go through that. Gitignore is for Git. ESLint is another library that allows you to check your code and make sure that everything is running well. If you're typing everything, if you have any errors, issues, this and that, it is again quite opinionated, but it runs really, really well. All right. So how are we, boy? Installed?
Still going.
Okay.
Nope. Yeah, it's
Yeah.
installing.
It's still installing? All right. So I don't know how to continue. Let's wait because Node.js is something that we really need. You have everything else, guys. You have code, Node.js, and this. So while you waiting for installing, we will need a database. So let's go and set up our database. Okay, let's get a database set up. So I told you previously, prior to this, I don't know if you guys had a chance, but go to vercel.com, which is a platform that we will be using to deploy our websites. And I have SkillPies is running on it, and most of my other applications are running on it. It has a very nice free tier. So sometimes when SkillPies craps up, it's because all of my things are running on free tier, and the free tier shuts down your apps if they are not being in use. And once you boot it up and it takes too long, it craps up, but only once. Okay. So if you could log in there and use your GitHub credentials, that usually works best for me. All right, so I'm in my dashboard. And the next thing that I want you to do, as you can see, I have a huge amount of projects on Vercel. This is probably empty for you. And this is my skill pie, okay? For example, instance. But what I want you to do is go to the storage. And up in here, I want you to do a create database, okay? Is everybody logged in Vercel?
Yeah.
Yep. Elias, Bui, all good?
Yes.
Luis, yeah, good.
That's good.
And let me know, Bui, after you finish installing the Node.js, okay?
Yeah.
All right. And so when you create database, I want you to click on create Postgres, and it's gonna tell me that I cannot, because in your free tier you can only create one database. But for you, it's going to create a database. And that's all that we kind of needed to do right now, because then you should be, then if you click on it, you should see something like this. All right.
What should we
And
call to do that?
I named it projects.
Okay.
It doesn't really matter. I named it projects. You can name it, Fluffy Bunnies, or, like Terminator 3. Doesn't really matter. You will not engage with the name. If you will start having more databases, that's when it becomes a bit more important, right? If you want to have like unique names or whatever. Okay. So, and you've just, procured your very first online database. Postgres is kind of like industry standard right now. You can run it from that container, this and that, but this one is really good for pet projects. It has pretty good storage for most things that you will ever need. All right, boy, we good with Node.js?
It's still downloading. So long.
Still downloading. It has only 20 megabytes.
It's setting up like path in my window is
Is it downloading or installing?
installing. It's
I'll
installing.
I'll have to move on. I'm sorry. Because...
Yeah, keep.
All right. So so we have to move on a little bit so that we can, stick to this 1 hour of time, 1.5 hours that we have together. Don't worry about it, you'll be able to catch up. So what I want you to do now is go to your terminal, and again, Control tilde, or there must be a shorthand command for it. I don't know what it is. And what I want you to do is write npm -g I for install and pnpm. So npm -g I npm. What does this is globally installs a pnpm package. All right. So what I've done is, and if you run now pnpm and you do -- version, you should have it installed. Okay. And for me, it's version 892. pnpm is a bit smarter version of the npm package, which I really like to work with, because what it does, npm, when you install your packages into your folder, every single application shares the same packages, and soon you run out of disk space. Like I ended up having almost half a terabyte worth of packages while most of my projects share the same. What PNPM does, it shares the packages in between things, and it's much less intense for your hardware space. Okay. All right. And also this project has been set up with PNPM. So it's much nicer package manager. It's also faster than NPM, and it's just pleasant to work with. So once you've installed this, what I want you
Sorry, I'm just gonna give you error messages. It says permission denied when I ran the.
Okay, so if you have it, you have a Mac probably, right?
Yeah.
Okay, so what I want you to do is do sudo
Yep.
npm gipnpm. Okay, it will ask you for your local user password.
Yep.
And it should work it should work now.
Okay, yes.
It worked?
Yeah.
Okay, yeah. Sudo basically temporarily gives you administrative privileges to execute a command and install those things. So if you guys do pnpm version, it should be installed there. Okay.
Yeah.
All right. So, boy, any luck so far? Still installing. It's really small package, by the way. So I don't know why it's taking so long.
I don't know either. I'm just keep going. I'll figure something out.
Okay. You really can't go without Node.js because the whole thing runs on Node.js. Okay. So now what we do is do pnpm I for install. Okay. So same thing in the command, you do pnpm I. It's now going to download all the packages for you and install them in your local directory. All right. I'm gonna wait for you guys to finish.
I ran pnpmi, but it said no package.json found in the directory, even though I can see a package.json.
Okay, you need to be. So are you in code and you are seeing this structure here on your left?
Yeah.
What is the directory name in which you are? Can you do pwd, print working directory?
Yeah.
And make sure it is in the okay, that's strange. So let me please share your screen so that we see what's going on.
I think I may not be in the.
Yeah, I don't think you're in the correct directory, which is fine. No problem. Okay. If you can just share your screen with me and we'll figure it out. Gives more time for Boy to install everything.
I just did it. I changed it. I wasn't in the correct directory. I changed the directory and it started downloading.
Okay, beautiful. All right. So, how are we doing, guys? Luis, Tao, Angelina, all good?
Yep, all good.
All
Yes,
good. All good, all good, all good. Okay. Thumbs up. Just yell at me if you need me to stop a little bit, okay? So what we have done now is we've created this directory called node modules, which installed all the packages that we've required for this to run. All right. And the next thing that we're going to do is we're going to try to run the project now. Okay. And the way you run, you can look in this package.json file, and in there you have a part called scripts here. And these are all the things that you can run. You can build your project, you can push to the database. Studio, I never used it. Dev means it runs a development version of your file. You can lint, start, blah, blah, blah. We'll go through this as they come. Your two most important parts are start and dev. Dev starts a development version, which we need now. And to run anything, you do pnpm, which is your package manager, and all you need to do is just do dev. And you should receive an error, okay? And it tells you, which is really cool also here in the this T3 stack, it also tells you if you don't have good environment variables set up, right? Environment variables we set up in a way because sometimes you don't want to share your secrets in a repository, right? Because, for example, you can put an AWS access key, which allows you to send emails to people, or your S3 bucket key where you can upload your things. If you would share this with the world, then anybody can, for example, send emails to your account and it costs you money, or can upload or modify content in your bucket, which you don't want that. So anything that is secret, anything that sets up your repository, such as database URL, you want to keep it only local and you never insert it into the database. That's why we have environmental variables. And you can see here that we have two different already examples, right? Which is something with database URL. And you can have many different environmental variables, for example, different for your development version, for your production version, for your test version, all in all, okay? So what I want you to do, just click on this .env test for now to make sure that you are in the root directory. And then click on this button here, new file, and do .env, which creates a new environmental file. And if you click on it, it will also turn gray, right? And it turns gray because it is excluded from the repository. Means it will never land in your GitHub repository. And you can double check it here in your .gitignore, which tells you what you should ignore. 100% you will find your .env and .env local in there, right? So now you are safe to share your secrets with your projects that nobody else will know about. And we need to set up all of these variables in order to continue, all right? So it's going to take us about 10 minutes. Unfortunately, it's not so easy, but we've already done one big step, which is set up a database URL. So we start with E2E. So let's type E2E, which tells the application the way it's set up, whether you are currently doing end-to-end testing, yes or no. In this case, we just put false. We are not doing end-to-end testing. We are just doing a standard application now. The next one is database URL. And this time we will go to our Postgres instance that you guys have set up on Vercel. And all I want you to do is click on this copy snippet. Okay. Yeah, we don't really need that. So clicking on the PSQL, so you're here, making sure that the first one is selected. I want you to copy snippet. And you go back to your project, and then you paste it next to the database URL, okay? One thing is that this snippet contains this PSQL thingy here, which is basically giving you a command to connect to that instance. We don't want that right now, okay? So we save that. We still need two new secrets to set up, which is a GitHub client ID and GitHub client secret. Why is that? It is because I am using a library called Auth, which I'll show you in a second, which uses these social logins, right? Usually 99% of the time, you do not want to be managing your own logins. You want to use existing login infrastructure to deal with your authentication, because you are basically, if you use your own users, you are exposing yourself to hack attempts, all of those things, right? So it's just best to use the existing ones, okay? So what we're going to do is make space here, and we just copy this GitHub client ID equals, and then GitHub client secret, okay? All right, and how do we get those, okay? So as I mentioned, there is this library called Auth, and I'll just write GitHub, okay? So next-auth GitHub. And you should have this link here, next.auth.js org, provider GitHub. And if you click on GitHub here, it takes you to the web where it tells you how can you set up a GitHub provider for your authentication. Otherwise, it's next-auth.js.org providers GitHub, okay? /providers/GitHub. If you check here which providers you can use, you have a huge amount of them, all right? We could use Apple, but I know not all of you have Apple. Atlassian, Auth0, Battle, Bungle, Coinbase, Dropbox, email, blah, 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 blah. You have many of them, right? So why would you waste time creating your own authentication library if you have already all this for your disposal? Only very rarely you really want to be managing your own passwords. All right, so what this tells you is this is where you configure it, right? So I'll just right click under configuration. This is documentation of how you can set it up, but I'll give you a fast forward here. You just go here. I'm just going to open it in a new tab, which takes you to this screen, okay? If you are logged in GitHub, I'm pretty sure all of you are because you've been forking your project, it takes you to this part. Now, the next bit is, I don't want you to create a GitHub app. We just need an authorization app. And I've already set up mine, but I want you to click on new OAuth app. And let me open mine on the side so that I can tell you what you need to fill it up there. Let me close this. And let me put this one to the left. Like so. And then this one to the right, because I always forget what you should put there, okay? All right, so, and what I want you to do now, with this, you will create a, you will tell GitHub, you give GitHub permissions to use your GitHub credentials to connect to this particular app. So for application name, let's just put get things done. Homepage URL, you can just use HTTP localhost 3000 at this moment, which is your test URL. If you deploy this to production, you can use it to deploy this to production, whatever you want. Yeah. So HTTP double colon / localhost 3000. Okay. Which is great. And then the next bit is to set callback URL. And this one is a bit more hands-on. It's this one. All right. So just copy whatever you typed in up in here. HTTP localhost /3000 / API callback GitHub. All right. So let's make this a bit bigger so you guys see. And that's all that you needed to do. Okay. So get things done, localhost, this and that. Or if you want to reuse this, not just for get things done, just name this. I would name this development, which will development. All right. What this does is, if you will create a, and you'll see it shortly, whether you choose development or get things done, when you make a request to GitHub to use OAuth, it will ask you, do you want to authorize things? Let's just leave it here, okay? Get things done. And if you say yes, it will then redirect back to this. So for your live application, you probably would use your live URLs, whatever they are, okay? We can set it up later on. But for local development, this will work well. Let's just name it get things done. You can rename it at any given moment, okay? So I'm just gonna hit cancel here because I've already set it up. But then make sure you click on OK. So go back to developer settings. So I forgot new OAuth app. Yeah, click on register application, not OK. Okay. So register application, and you should have these two. I have one for Job IQ and I have one for get things done. Okay. So Job IQ can be also, which is my other app, which I'm using OAuth for. Now, if you click on get things done, you will have these two things. You will have a client ID. So let's just double click it, copy it, and let's put it into our app. Okay. So GitHub client ID is this one. I'm not going to show it to you live on screen because I don't want to share it with you. Maybe I can, you know what, I'll just delete it later on. Okay, so this is my client ID. And now my client secret, which is which I'm going to create again. You want to create a new client secret. Okay, so you generate a new client secret. You probably will need to use your password. I've set up passkeys for my GitHub, but for you, just enter your password or whatever, and it will create a new client secret, which is this one. I copy it, and you know, it's actually easy for me to use it because after the recording, and I'll share it with the world, I can just remove the secret and nobody will ever be able to use it. Okay, so and we're done. So we've just set up a couple things. We still will need one more thing to set up, but let's just say save. So I have my client ID, my client secret, and let's try to run pnpm dev. And it still tells me that there is something missing, and that is this last thing called next auth URL, which is a URL that next authorization is using to access things, right? It's an important thing to set up. Let's just put next auth URL, and the next auth URL is HTTP localhost 3000. Okay, and we're done. So like I said, I thought it's going to be half an hour. It was only 10 minutes, which is great. But we've done a lot of things here, guys, right? We've set up a database which we can access. We have configured an access provider, which we can now use for users to log in the application. And we've set up the authorization, the whole authorization protocol with 4 variables pretty much. Okay. You can imagine how complicated it can get. But if we got lucky and we do now pnpm dev again, we should get a beautiful no errors message. And if we go to localhost 3000, we should get this, right? Now, let's try to log in. So if we click on sign in and you click on sign in with GitHub, yeah, shit, I set up everything. So you should receive an error, okay? So you should have received an error, and you should have received a bunch of issues, right? And the problem for this error is that the tables that the authentication workflow needs are not created as of now. Okay, so actually I'm going to simulate this with what you're going through, and let me connect to the database. There are a bunch of other where is the Vercel progress? And then let me actually delete I could have just deleted, okay. And then save. Oh, I can't delete it like this. Now let me actually go one by one. So I delete the user and then cascade. There we go. Now we can delete the account. Cascade. Post, and now I should be able to delete all of them. Okay, there you go. So I've just deleted my whole database, so it's empty for me. So if I would now restart this place and just do pnpm dev, and I'll go to a localhost 3000 and click on sign in with GitHub. Just try signing with different account here. This is there, hopefully that you have guys seen. And if I go to my error, it actually tells you, hey buddy, they look a bit daunting, but basically somewhere there will tell you that there are no public account does not exist in the current database, right? So it tells you, hey, you're trying to insert into table account, which doesn't exist in the database. So what we need to do is we need to create those tables. And this is where another tool, which is part of this stack called Prisma, comes to play. So Prisma is something called ORM framework that allows you to just define the schema of your database, such as this one. We know that we have a post there, we have an account, we have session, user, and so on. And using these things, you can just tell Prisma to upload your things into the database and then create type-safe accessors to these fields, okay? So we are not going to do it just now because we need to do one thing, which I'm going to shorten your things, because here in the Next.js, it tells you if you have to go through that documentation of each of these providers to see what you need to do, but tells you that GitHub returns something called refresh token expires in, which is a number. Remember to add this field to your database schema if you are using an adapter. We are using an adapter, which is called the Prisma adapter, so we need to address this problem. All right, so refresh token expires in. We are going to add into our schema, right? So just copy that, go back to your schema, and here in the token, we are going to do paste, and we're going to name it exactly int with a question mark. That question mark is important there. It tells it that it's not a required field. If you would make it required, you will run into issues, right? So under account, I can just move it up here, refresh token expires in, and then you hit Command S is for save, which saves the new of your schema. All right. All right. So the next thing that we're going to do is we're going to upload stuff into the database. So as if when I do this, if I refresh, no tables are there. So we're going to run a new command called pnpm again, then Prisma, which is this framework that we are using, db database push, means push all the local changes from your Prisma into the database. And you hit on enter. What it does, it will now save everything in your database. Okay, it's quite smart. It's using actually the same environment variable that we have created, and it just runs really well. If I would now refresh this tool that I'm using for tables, you can use any. There are even plugins for Visual Studio Code that you can use to manage your database, but just trust me on this. Now we have those tables. So running this thing again, pnpm dev, going to my localhost 3000, going back here. So localhost 3000, after I pushed everything and clicking on sign in with GitHub, I have successfully logged in, and it told me logged in as Tomasz Treskak. You probably have one more window somewhere in that process telling you, do you authorize Get Things Done app to access your data, right? That's what you probably have seen somewhere along that way. But because I've already authorized Get Things Done to go with my account, I no longer need to do that part as well, okay? But yay, look at that. We're signed in, we have a new app, everything is peachy. We can finally start programming. But we've just started, and yes, it took me 47 minutes to get here, but just getting authentication right takes a week or weeks to make sure that everything runs as it is, right? So it might seem like a lot of work, but we've set up the database, we've set up authentication workflow, and we have the application up and running in 47 minutes. Might seem a long time, but once these things become manual, you literally just clone this stack, you set up your provider, set up that environmental variable, and you can now focus on your work. It's might not seem like it, but it's super efficient. Like authentication is a nightmare. Database setup, nightmare. Creating tables, nightmare. All of these things were done automatically for you with very little coding, basically setting up few environmental variables. All right. That's why I really like this stack. So let me make this on the side. Pause if you need me to pause. Call out if you need me to pause, because we're going to start programming now. All right, so I'm going to make this here on the side. Oops, make it a bit smaller, even smaller. I'm going to be doing to-do app, which doesn't need to be too big. All right, and make this a bit bigger. All right, let me slightly smaller. All right, so what are we going to do now is we are going to change a couple things. So let's explore the structure of the T3 Next.js project, right? I'm not going to explain everything, but most important thing is in public, you have all the public files. In this case is your your icon that basically, in this case is a T3. If you want to change it to something that you want to use. Most of the fun happens here in the source directory. For now, let's ignore the trpc folder that sets up trpc package for you. trpc is used to retrieve the data from the backend and bring it onto the client. In styles, we have your CSS styles. We'll work with those later on. In server, you set up everything related to data retrieval and so on, something called the T3 routers. We'll get to that very soon. And in the app is your actual application, right? So up in here, it's using something called the Next.js app folder, where each of these folders represents one route. And I'll show you in a moment what I mean by that. API contains your API. That means in this case, the API, what we have here is set up your authorization, seeding of your database if you ever need it, right? So in here, in this case, you can just seed, in this case, it creates your dummy user. So you can just call your application seed and it seeds all the data that you need. Sign in handles your sign in and trpc sets up your trpc things. Nothing that we need right now is here. So let's forget about that folder for now. And I don't think for get things done app, you will need to touch this directory. One thing that I want to change, I have no idea why they decided to use underscore for components. So let's just rename that to components and hit enter, which will eventually break your app. But the Visual Studio Code should ask you if you want to update imports. Don't do always. I like to be in control whether I want to import or not. So just click on yes, and it will update the imports. And then your app should actually, if it still doesn't rebuild, it has changed things and hasn't saved. In my case, I already opened the page. So you need to save that page to get that back to the working state. Okay, if it didn't ask you to update the things, the references, you just need to change it into two places in your components and here in the components. Okay, so here was underscore, here was underscores, change those two and save it, and you should have the working app again. All right, so first thing we're going to do is we're going to change this text, create T3 app. We want to change this to get things done. So where can we find it? As I've mentioned, every single page file represents one route. So what I mean by that is if I would, for example, create here in the app here a new directory called hello, and in here I create a page.tsx. All right. I will now export the UI that I want to render when I come to the hello route. So I do export, and in this case, it must be a default export, right? So just trust me on this, is export default function. And I just do this, and up in here, I return something like this, hello default function, read hello world. All right, there are some couple things, so let's just change it. Let's just do function page. It's just giving you some extra comments, this TS-lin, and I just do export default page. Okay, this is a bit cleaner. It was complaining that it didn't know the name of the component. But if you have something like this, and I'll wait for you to finish typing it, I'll just show you what it does. If I would go now to localhost -hello, I'm getting my hello world, right? So it's using something called the directory-based routing, where each directory represents one route in your application, right? So your application -hello renders text up in here, all right? So you've just created your very first route. We will work with the routes a bit later on. But for now, we know that if we want to change this T3 tag, so if I go back to my localhost 3000, I must search for it somewhere where the route is defined. So I would go to the page, which is on under app, the top level page is the root of my web application. And little did we know, look at that, it's here, right? It's up in here. We found it directly. So it's here. Create T3 app. It's up in there. So let's name it get. And I like this font. So get things done. And if I save it, I've changed it to get things done. Okay. You see all these weird long texts here? This is Tailwind, right? It basically creates this, instead of writing this align item center, it's just a shorthand notation for its items center. Okay, so it's like faster way of writing styles and having them in each of these things makes things a little bit messy. You have to, start to like it. I kind of like it. It works really well for me. You choose whether you want to use it or not. I'll be using it, but in the future you can decide what you want to do. There's another thing called layout up in here next to the page, which essentially shares the common layout for every single page that is under this directory, unless it finds a different layout. I will not go into much details about this, just so you know, the way the page is rendered, if I would say, for example, here, I will do something like this. I will say, this is before page, and then put this is after page. If I save this, you get this. This is before page and this is after page. All right. So essentially in your layout, if I would go, for example, to my hello, right? I'll go to hello. I have the same thing. Yeah. So it first renders the layout, and within that layout, under this children property, renders whatever is in there. Right. So if you need to change something that all your pages share, you change it in this layout file. All right, I'll just go back here. And now let me just remove this before and after page. All right, we're getting there. So going back to the page, we want to remove all this stuff, right? So all right, so get things done is okay. The user here, it's something that I've probably forgot to remove. And then we have these two links, which we don't really need them, so we can remove them as well, right? So anything under get things done all the way up in here, we can remove. If you look at it, it really resembles a standard HTML code. Apart from that, you have these weird new tags that are essentially a new elements that you create in React, right? So if you look, this is a component called home, which would be then created something like this, right? Home. That renders much more code, right? That's why React is something called a component-based design. So let's remove this session up in here, and also remove this div. If you don't know until when, it's always better just to collapse it, and then you can just remove the whole thing. So delete. Okay. So we're getting there. So what we want to do now is we want to we have about half an hour now left. So in that half an hour, what I want to do is set up this to-do model and insert one of the to-dos. Okay. So let's do just that. Okay. So what we need to do now is let's first set up the UI for this. Okay. So we want to set up, we have no posts yet, because up in here, hold where does it says where we have no posts yet? It must be here, logged in, link. Hello, session, CRUD showcase. Oh yeah, CRUD showcase. Right, so under all of this, this is your login part. Yeah, so hello from trpc. So it's from here, hello, greeting, loading trpc. What this did is it's loaded a message from trpc, which again we don't need, so we can remove this. So hello can go. We can also remove this hello because you can already see these messages. So we just clean up the code to getting ready that page ready for us and save. So we have the logged in as Thomas Treskak, so that's fine. We want to keep that, although we can move it probably to some better location later on. But for now, we just want to do this, right? So the CRUD showcase, what it does, it's essentially gets the session. If the user is not logged in, it doesn't render. If the user is logged in, it uses this API, this trpc that I told you, to get the latest post. And if there is a latest post, it tells you that there is a most latest post. So let's just create one, hey? Say hello. Click on submit. It submits and it tells you that your most recent post is hello. Okay. And if I would go to the database in the post, I can find this post hello. Okay. So eventually this is, we don't want that, right? So, but let's not delete it. Let's just comment it out. Which is comment / or I have no idea how to, let me just see if that has Command Shift P, comment, bold, no, just Control / guys, comment / it's for commenting. I have no idea how to do this via menus. And then we also want to remove this element, CRUD showcase. Okay. All right. So what do we get there? We get a pretty clean front end and does really absolutely nothing. So what we're going to do now is we're going to create a new component that will list the to-dos for us. Okay. So going to components, we right click here, we do a new file and we'll do to-do list.tsx. Okay. And what this should do is list all the to-dos that we have there. Let's first create a couple to-dos just on the fly, which we will use, and then we'll ask them, for the database to create them from the database. So let's just create a couple to-dos. And what we want to do is to create an array, so const to-dos, and yeah, this sounds about right. Okay, I have this thing, the GitHub Copilot, which allows me to do all these things, but you guys please type it out, and I'll wait for you a little bit here. So what we do is we add a new to-do, which is ID has 1, has a title, and then we say whether it's completed or it's not completed. Okay, so add 1 or 2. So one of them ID 1, title would be learn the React, completed true. ID 2, title learn TypeScript, completed false, and 3, GraphQL, completed false. Okay. And then we will do a new component, which again, I'm not gonna waste time typing because it already gave me the whole application here. This is the power of a GitHub Copilot, but it kind of that's kind of what I want you to type as well. Okay, so again, I'll wait for you here. So you want to have a to-do list. What I'm going to do, I'm going to export here. And what this does, it's and I actually prefer this notation, function notation, instead of this variable notation. So export function to-do list. which returns a list of to-dos which come from these to-dos, and then they are visualized as a list. The key must be always added. We'll get to that a bit later on. Just trust me. Each of these fields must have a key and must be unique. So in this case, let's just use to-do ID, and then we just render the title. Okay. So function to-do list, return UL, and then for each of the to-dos, we map over the to-do list, returning this thing. I hope you have some TypeScript, JavaScript beginnings to understand what this does. To-dos map essentially just same thing as this. So for const to-do of to-dos, it returns, it would be something like this, const result equals 0, and then result push to the title, return result. Don't type this, I'm just showing you how map works. Yeah, so for each of the elements of the to-dos, each of the element of the to-dos returns something specific. Okay, so it would be actually this, push this. Okay, so for each of the element of the to-dos, it does something with an element and returns it back to the array. Okay, so that's what map does. And maps you will use forever and ever in React. They are like a for loops. Another way to imagine this, how it would work, if we would have something like this for, which will never work. Well, each to-dos. Yeah, so imagine for each to-do of the to-dos elements, do this. Okay. Something like this. Okay, in some other languages would be something like that, right? So for each of the to-do elements, draw these things. But in React, we do this via map. All right. So let's just save it. And then in the to-do list, going back to the page, we are going to add it after this last div. So before, actually after the, yeah, before the last div, we're going to do to-do list. Okay. And then type it. If you did it with a to-do list and you hit enter, it also automatically inserted this thing for you. If it didn't, if you have it something like this and it's not there, you should be able to hover it. This blue thingy comes in and it tells you add import from components to-do list. Okay, which is automatically inserted up in here. So imported this new component called to-do list, and it's imported here in. Okay, and if we save it, look at that. All right, we have our list of to-dos rendered. Okay, we're going to just style it a little bit better. So, with a list of to-dos, we're going to say up in here that style. Actually, we're going to use Tailwind. So we can use class name. And then for the class name property, we say if to-do, again, look, it's reading my mind. Unbelievable, this thing. Can you believe that? This is power of generative AI for you. All right. So if to-do is completed, it will add a line through class name. Another way would be through, if you would be using styles instead of Tailwind, you would do something like this: style to do. If it's completed, exactly. Again, reading my mind. Right. So what this does, it tells you, okay, if the to-do is completed, I want to add a text declaration line through style. Otherwise, I don't want any style. Or we're going to use just a Tailwind here. So we are going to learn a new Tailwind class, which is a line through. If you save this, the learn React, since it was marked as completed, is now stroke through. Okay. All right. You know what? Let's focus on this session on front end. on front end, and then we will learn how to do things on the back end. Yeah, let's do that. Right. So we'll do another session and I'll call it out. We can again agree on it. I'll probably do some poll for you to vote on, and then we'll cover the backend next week, because we have 20 minutes to go, and it wouldn't probably be. You know what? Let's do the backend. So we cover everything a little bit, and then once you start doing the React tutorial, then you will know what to do here, right? So what you would have to do, what you would want to implement here is, for example, by clicking on one of these parts, you complete it, right? Clicking on it again, you uncomplete it, right? So try to do this as an exercise. It would be using something called state. And if you go through introductory React courses, it's pretty trivial. Instead, what we're going to do is we're going to design a new model for our to-dos, which is going to copy this structure, and then we're going to link it onto the front end, right? So it's going to be a bit nicer, and at least I'll introduce you to all the components. So the next thing that we need to go is to go to, if you push Command P or Control P on Windows, and you search for Prisma, gets you to this database. Okay, so one thing we want to do is we want to create a new model called to do. All right, and first thing is what we want to do is add all the fields. So first of them is ID, and look at it again, specified all the fields. So for ID, we'll be using just integers, which is fine. It's probably not the most secure way. It's best to do like unique IDs, but it's fine. We are going to name it ID. And what we're going to say is that the default value of an ID, if it's not specified, it just automatically increments to the latest possible value, right? That's the clue model. Then we want to have a title of a to-do. We want to know whether it's done. And again, if it's not specified, for example, if we're inserting a new data, it says it's the default value will be false. So if you insert it by default, it's none. Created at, it tells you that the default value will be now. Again, so if I would be inserting something in the database, literally all I have to specify is the title. The value of ID is automatically created. The value of done is automatically created. The value of created at is automatically created. And updated at is also automatically created, which adds a value for updated at, right? Which essentially is the same thing as now. One thing this is missing, would you be able to tell me? What is this table missing from the data design perspective? No one? How am I able to say which to do is whose users? I can't, right? So what we need to do is add a new thing called user ID, which is a string. And in Prisma, actually, it's very easy to specify something like this, is that to access user on a to-do, it automatically creates this relation, meaning that I can relate a foreign key, something called a foreign key. Hopefully you've heard about those. A foreign key for the to-do is, so I'm combining my user ID from my table, and it's referencing the ID on the user table. And you're gonna have this long red line, but if you hit Control S, you will see that on user, it automatically creates a relation to-dos, which is beautiful, because then Prisma, you will be able to access the list of to-dos for a user just by referencing this to-do. I'm actually gonna rename it to to-dos. Okay, so I'm gonna show it to you so you guys can copy this stuff. So I have a to-do model, which I've created with an integer, default auto increment. I've said that it belongs to a particular user under his or her string. I'm also able to relate to the user that owns the to-do using this particular relation by joining current to-dos field user ID with a field ID on the user. So it creates like a foreign key relation between the two tables. Then I know my title of my to-do, whether the to-do is done. It's a Boolean value with the default value of false. I will know when the to-do was created, and I will know when to-do was updated. Okay. So hopefully you guys had chance to type it all out. And so now what we'll do is I will now stop the application. So Control C in your terminal. And I'll leave it up here. So remember, if you hit Control S, it also automatically creates these to-dos. You don't need to type this; they're done automatically for you. And what we do now is we do again pnpm Prisma db push. There is another way to do this through migration, but since we are doing things at the get-go, I'll show you migrations later. Push. And what this does is it created a new database table. So if I refresh this, I have my table now here to do with all these values: ID, user ID, title, done, created as. Again, right? So beauty, you created a model of your thing and it has been automatically inserted into the database. So let me just write an email to Jerome. So we get more time, guys. All right, so let's now set up the data access. Okay, let's actually do one thing. We have no data in the database, so let's set up a seed, something called a seed. Okay, so up here in the API, in the seed part and the route, it creates some users, right? So let's comment this out. Let's remove this this thing. But what we'll do is you can see that this handler seeds new users. Okay, we do have a user already there. So seed to-dos. So first we'll get a user, right? You've already created your first user. So what we'll do is we'll use an asynchronous method coming from Prisma. Prisma has been already, so not only Prisma creates these things, the database, it also allows you to access the data. So for user, we do Prisma. And then if you do dot, you can see it has already access to account, post, session, user, and it doesn't have to-dos. Nope, doesn't have yet to-dos because we forgot one thing. But for now, let's just do Prisma dot user and do find first, right? We'll just get a first user that's in our database, and that's your user, right? That's the one that is already there. And if it's not there, we can do even find first or throw if you want to make sure that there is at least one user. But the very first in the database will be there. Now, the next thing what we want to do is to do seed all the to-dos. Okay, so we'll seed 3 to-dos, and then let's just go and seed these 3. Let's just copy them here into the route. We can actually copy them out here somewhere at the beginning, right? We don't need to be the part of the handler. And then all we really need to do is just we can remove the IDs and just click keep this, right? So we will just say which is completed, which is not, right? So now what we'll do, since we have the to-dos there, we can now go do for to-dos, for const to-do of to-dos. We want Prisma to-dos and then create the we want create the to-do and assigning the user ID, which would be the user.id. I have two errors here that I need to address, but I'll let you type this out. But meanwhile, I'll explain. We have two errors. The first one is Prisma doesn't yet exist on the Prisma client. So I'll show you in a second how to generate it. And the second error tells me that the user is possibly null, right? So there is something called, this is not the bug per se, but in case the user wouldn't exist, it would not be good, right? So there are two ways we can fix this. The first one is saying that if user is null, throw no user found, okay? And little that we know, the ingenuity of TypeScript is that this is no longer is okay. Because up here, the type of the user, if you see in the IntelliSense, it's either user or null, okay? But since we've tested here that the user is null, in this code underneath, the user is always defined, right? That's why I just love TypeScript so much, right? So up here, the user could be null, but since I threw this error in this code, in this branch of code, the user cannot be null. The other way, an easy way to fix this is easier, is to find first or throw, okay? And in this case, user will always be defined, right? Because if it's not defined, if it doesn't exist, it will actually throw an error, okay? The next part is also super easy to fix. In your console, you do pnpm pnpm Prisma generate, which generates a new client. So db push pushes the data in the database. Prisma generates a new client which allows you to be used, and it is been showing you here, right? So use Prisma client in your things. It still says to-do doesn't exist because I think we named it to-dos. Nope. Prisma. Why don't you exist? Just quickly go here. Okay. All right, so it's actually a problem of tooling. So Visual Studio Code, it's also WebStorm is a little bit better. So it's just the Visual Studio Code didn't really realize that that the to-do exists there. So it actually was generated. So if you still have an error there, just hold Control or Command and on this user here. And if you click on that, you will enter inside the definition of this file, and then TypeScript picks up that change, and then the error will disappear. Okay. So and that's pretty much it, right? So we have no errors. Life is peachy. Let's save this. And what we'll do is we'll go in our URL and we'll call API seed, right? So /API/seed. And if you do this, sorry, first of course, we have to run our project. So pnpm dev, which gets you in this turbo mode. There is an error that we have. This endpoint is only available in E2E mode. Oh, okay. Yeah. All right. So up in here, that's what I said. So I use the seed endpoint to actually seed everything in end-to-end mode. For now, we disable it because we're just playing with this, but you probably don't want to have this endpoint running all the time, because then somebody comes to your application and then seeds the data in the database at any moment. And part of the seeding is actually, if you check up this spot, it actually erases every single table, right? So erases all the data in your table, right? And actually just, we want to keep the user that is logged in there. Let's also comment this out, right? So let's also comment the erasure. But literally the only thing that we will keep here will be the Prisma client and the code that we have just typed. Okay, so no check for E2E, Prisma, and then the code that we type. So if I save this and just clear up my console, and if I do this, it's still complaining about what? Prisma to do create invocation. Oh yeah, it's telling me I've just used my IntelliSense, so generative AI is not almighty. It's telling me that I've named field completed, but in my database structure, I don't have completed, I have done. Okay, so look at that. So instead of completed, and if you want to actually be sure that you've done everything okay, that's another beauty of Prisma. It generates TypeScript types for you. So what we can do is we can strongly type this array, and we say that it's actually to do, right? From Prisma client, it's an array of to-dos. And look at that, it's even telling me, hey buddy, the completed doesn't even exist on to do. Okay, so it actually needs to be called done. And what else do you need? Is missing some required properties from type, which is missing what? Okay, so we just don't want that. We can make this partial. Okay, and so yeah, sometimes it's I don't want the full thing. I just want to partial representation. So done, completed, done. Save again. Beautiful. And let's just reseed this. All right. So database was seeded now, which is good, right? So partial basically tells you that you don't require the whole object. You only want some part of the object that you're defining here. But if that key doesn't exist, like it didn't, it will throw an error. Okay, so if I see this, we can see that I got my user ID that I've created, the titles, the done, value created, updated, it's all there. Okay. So, right, so my seed is done. We will not be seeding anymore. So let's just close this route so it's not reseeded again. Because if you would run it again, a new that you would just go populating still these three to do. So I'm just done with this part. So let's quickly, we have about 15 minutes more, set up the way we can actually get this data from the backend onto the front end. So we have a data in the database using the seed route, and it's always good to really enable this for the hell of it, so that if you run this in production, you don't want people to erase the data in your database, right? So this should probably shouldn't be there. Okay, so let's keep that, but we've done with seeding. Let's just call it a day, and this is done. And close this. Okay. So the next part that we need to do is set up the backend so that it gets the data from the database and sends it back to the client. So let's look at what we already have there. So we have an app, which is okay, but like I said, everything related to the data is handled on the server. And up in here, you will be defining your own router, right? You have a good example here of a post router, which does two things. If you called hello, it just returns hello with whatever input you gave it to do. It can do a creates. It creates a new post based on the name that you give it. It does some kind of some kind of mutation. It simulates a slow DB call, which we don't care about. Gets the latest post and gets some secret message. Okay, it's using two different things. You can see there is a public procedure and a protected procedure. Uploaded from here. And the protected procedure, basically, you can export it later. It doesn't allow to be executed if the user is not registered, right? If the user is not logged in. So essentially, you're not able to call this API route if the user is not logged in. It's just beautiful, right? So it's kind of what we wanted. So let's just do a giant Command A, Control C, and let's create a new to-do router here, right? So let's just do new file on routers, and let's call this to-do.es. So we create a new router that will be handling to-do routes. Let's paste it here, and let's just keep only one of these routes. I would just keep, let's say, I would just keep get latest. That one's good, and we can erase everything else. Okay. So we'll essentially, oops, I pressed something I shouldn't have, and just erase this. So we have now created our very first router. Okay. So what do we want to have? And this is going to be called, we rename it to the to-do router. Right. So this is my new to-do router. Don't forget about all this fluff around it. It's fine. We will need one other thing to set it up here. So if you did this, there is one thing that you need to set up in the post. For example, in the hello public procedure, just copy this input line here. Yes, so just, or whichever, for example, this input, whichever works for you. And then in the to-do router, where you have this create trpc router, you have, let's rename get latest to to-dos. And then we may put this on the separate line and this on the separate line, okay? So what we've done now is we've created a new API route for data called to-dos. That is a protected procedure that requires an input of this particular format. ZOD is a data validation library that allows you to validate the data that is coming towards the endpoint. Okay. So in this case, we don't want it to be called the name of the post. We want to be called the title of the to-do. It is a string value. Just wing it with me, okay? For now, just think that this is the way it's done, right? So it's a string value, and it has to have at least one character, right? So let's say we can, okay, for to do, let's say 3 characters, okay? And then you define a query. So in this case, as you can imagine, you are getting the context here, CTX. I'll show you later on some advanced session, like where is this context coming from. But through some weird magic, you have in this context, you have a Prisma available for you under the cold DB. You can see that it's a Prisma client. So in this case, it wouldn't be the post, but it would be a to-do, right? So to-do. And we don't want to find first. We want to find many. We want to find many where I like to put first, where created by is user ID, and we order by created at, but it's saying something. I think this should have worked. So what is problem? Unsafe return of any typed value. Why is it unsafe? This is just this is not actually an error, it's just a warning, but it's telling you unsafe return of any. To do find many. Okay. Oh, yeah. Okay, because we actually don't have a. I copied it to soon, but it actually didn't exist, right? So I don't have a created by in my database. It actually what we have is we have a user ID there. So instead it should be user ID, and then it is we have a user ID stored in the session in the context user ID. Okay, so that's one error here. And then let's see if we can figure out the other error. Okay, let me just quickly see const to-dos. Oh, wait. Don't type this. I need to figure out why does it think it's unsafe. To-dos. Unsafe return of any type value. And you know what? Sometimes this bloody ESLint is just killing me. No unsafe return. All right, you know what? We are going to ignore it at this moment. So let's keep it to the way we had it. Okay. So I'm just going to undo all of that. And this should actually be okay. So what I'm going to do is use this and then disable TypeScript no unsafe return for this line to make sure that everything else is okay. Right. So I'm going to deal with that unsafe and I'll put it in the comments later on if I manage to solve it, this unsafe thing. Sometimes the tooling is smarter than all of us. But what we've done is we've created a protected procedure that accepts. What the hell am I talking about, guys? We don't need this input. We are not creating a to-do. We're actually just returning a list of to-dos. Sorry, brain fried. So we've created a protected procedure that returns all the to-dos created by this user. Simples, okay? So we actually didn't need this title. If we would have a mutation that creates a, so it would be something like this. So create to-do, again, don't type it, would be a protected procedure. Then I would use this, input, right? And then there would be a, then there would be a mutation, something like this, okay? And again, it's giving me this weird no unsafe return, but it's fine. All right, so that's something that probably should have been, and I because I have automatic for z from z. Again, just don't worry about it for now. The most important thing is that you have created this to do. But for those that want to continue, I've created a mutation that creates to do, but we'll get back to that later. So the last thing that we need to do is here in the root, we need to tell that in the main router that we've actually created this new router. So it would be to do router, okay? And then just use add import. Okay, so back in the root, in the app router, you use a to-do router, which is up in here. Okay. We are 2 minutes away from actually putting all this together. So what we've done is we created this new router that basically it's a type safe, like you saw it for creation. It actually, if you would make a title and number, it would throw an error. In this case, we know exactly what is returned from the API route. It's again very, 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 very beautiful. Here in the to-do router, I've added it to the main router so I can access its value, and I actually am going to disable. I don't want to deal with posts anymore. Okay. I don't have posts, so let's just remove it. I only have to-do router now. Okay, so that's your main app router. And so in the to-do list, I am going to, like I said, don't delete this original code, which was in the pages page, the main page. No, it was, where is it? Oh, did I delete it? Oh, no, here it is in the showcase, right? So up in here, this is how you were getting the latest post. So let's just copy this. So we're going to go to our to-do list. I'm going to copy this and let's make this an async function. Okay, it's an asynchronous function so that we can call awaits. And I'll explain this a bit later, but I just really need this session to finish. So, and then we are still missing the API. So going back to the page, we need to find out where is that API. And we don't have it, so let's just see if it finds it. So if we do this, so we do this for add import for trpc server. Okay, so we import the API from trpc server, and of course we are not trying to get the post, we're trying to get to do and to do's. Okay, so all I've done here is and let's name this to do's. We're going to remove this. We don't need them anymore. We're getting this from server. So all I'm doing is I'm calling the API that we have just selected. We've added this new to-do part. So if you click on it, you can see if you do control click, actually it points you to that to-do router that we have just added. Calls the function to-dos. Again, if you click on it, it gets you to that function. You can't even appreciate the beauty of this. And normally you chase this. And then, of course, now to-dos is safely typed. So we don't have no longer completed. We call it done. Okay. And now for the grand finale, if we save this, not much changed, but we have now just connected the whole thing together, where we are actually getting the data from our from the cloud. And rendering them on the front end. So that's kind of what I wanted to cover today, right? Because for each of these parts, you do have those individual tutorials. And on Monday, I will be actually covering more in depth the React part, right? So I will have about half an hour session, and I'll show you, for example, how to do these clickety things. And I'll update the code in the GitHub repository. Okay, so I hope I haven't lost you too much. Like I said, this is recorded, so we can you can get back to this at any moment. But we've done the full loop, right? We've set up the app by creating a database, by creating a login functionality through a social media provider, in this case GitHub. We have created a front end that disables a list of to-dos. And we've even set up a backend by creating a new data model, uploaded in the database, and creating a new API endpoint that gets the data and renders on the front end. So this was hour and 40 minutes of very intense things, but I can tell you it doesn't get much more complicated than this, right? With this knowledge that you have, you can pretty much finish this app very, very, very easily. Okay. All it gets now, there are no other moving parts here. The one last moving part is that there are differences between server components and client components in Next.js, but I can get to that a bit later on. The only thing that changes here is that you would be using something called IP, that you wouldn't be using API from server, but you would be using API from the client. No, I think it's called React. And then instead of to-dos, you would use to-dos, and then use query. That's pretty much the difference. And now this data is actually called from the client, not on the server, but that's maybe just too complicated for now. All right, so let me see your faces. Confusion. Somebody left. Don't worry about it, guys. This was the very first session where I've introduced 5 different things to you. I will be having these sessions with you. Next week, I will do at least 3, I would say. All right. And we'll get to individual bits. In this session, I really just wanted to introduce all the things that are in the project. And now you have this code that you have, and I'll send you the link after I finish this with the code that I've typed. I send you the link to my GitHub repo, which you can just download all that code and try play with it. For example, creating a new route by adding a new functionality, by adding the other things. All right. And I will record a new video on Monday where I will finish this whole Get Things Done app that will just follow on everything that we learned today. Okay?
Okay.
All right, guys, I got to run to my other meeting, but I hope this was marginally useful. Was it useful?
For
That
sure.
was very useful.
Okay.
It's really useful. Thank you.
All right, guys, I'm looking forward. Don't be scared. Like I said, this is the most complex thing you went through because you've just discovered whole thing, backend, front end, this language, that language, ORM, Prisma, trpc, right? But once you get this stack in your head, you will be super efficient in the long run, right? Adding new routes. Essentially, the workflow is, I want to add a new functionality. Do I need a new data model for it? Yes. Okay. So I'll go to Prisma. Do I do it? I don't? No, I don't. Okay, I don't touch Prisma. Do I need to get new data from the endpoint? Yes, I do. Okay, I create a new route in my trpc router. Done, right? Then I need to just change the front end. So essentially what you will be doing 90% of the time is creating new routes and adding new front end code to handle them. You know, so get the data from the DB, visualize it on the front end. And this is where your journey finishes, right? No more authorizations, none of that. Everything is set up for you. Protected routes, public routes, it's all there. All right, guys, I got to split.
Thank you so
Cheers.
much.
See you
See you on
soon.
So
Monday.
much.
Bye.
Thanks. Bye.